Welcome back. Regardless of the litigation now underway about this week's contested US presidential election, some things arguably never change as the US military seeks to block Chinese economic supremacy and as the US deep state seeks to neutralize rival powers. I'm joined now via Skype by author and editor Vijay Prashad. His new book, Washington Bullets, A History of the CIA Coups and Assassinations, is out now, and he joins me from Northampton in Massachusetts. Vijay, thanks so much for coming back on. Does it matter who wins? Obviously, in some minutiae, but as regards the issues in your new book?
No, the issues of U.S. foreign policy, U.S. aggression towards countries like Venezuela, towards countries like Cuba, the difference is not only minimal, it's just not there. This is a bipartisan consensus, whether you've had a Democratic president, liberal Democratic president, or you've had a far-right Republican president. They've all tried to overthrow governments, and they succeeded, from the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran from 1953 to Evo Morales in Bolivia 2019. There's been no difference. When you look at the record of these people, they all have a very similar attitude toward the world, which is to use U.S. power as much as possible to secure the basic, advantage to American corporations. And I don't see any difference in a Biden administration between Biden and Trump. There'll be a difference, Afshin, in attitude. A Trump presidency was a presidency where Mr. Trump essentially pushed people aside at international meetings to get to the front of the line when he's photographed. Biden will be a little more polite, but this politeness when bombs are being dropped on you is, to my mind, irrelevant.
I'll get to the bullets in more detail, but you mentioned Evo Morales there. He's written the preface to your new book. How do you think Washington will react? In the past few days, it's happened that Evo Morales can return to that lithium superpower. We often talk about the fact we all carry a bit of Bolivia with us in our mobile phones.
That's well said. We do carry a bit of Bolivia with us in our mobile phones. Evo Morales will return to Bolivia. The Bolivian people stood up against a coup d'etat, which they faced in November 2019. It's extraordinary, Afshin. We haven't really seen many examples of a coup d'etat happening, and in about a year, the people eject the coup government in a democratic process. They struggle and they fight and they bring their own people back in power. There's a major civil war, let's say, or a Cold War ongoing in Latin America between China and the United States. And we mustn't underestimate this. We saw this recently in El Salvador, where the president of El Salvador, a center-right person, went to China, cut a lot of deals. On the way back to El Salvador, stopped off in Tokyo, Japan. Shinzo Abe whispered in his ear and said, don't cut a deal with China regarding the port. The Americans showed up. They signed some deals with El Salvador, putting a lot of pressure to break with China. This is exactly what the Bolivia story is about. Evo Morales pivoted his country toward China. They had a number of important deals, including the Chinese help putting a Bolivian satellite into space called Tupac Katari satellite. The Americans were furious about this, and they overthrew the government. So this Cold War, where China's commercial interests in South America are being pushed back by the United States, not through its own commercial dealings, because the United States cannot actually compete commercially. As you see with Huawei and ZTE, they're using extra economic means to break the back of the Chinese commercial developments in these parts of the world. And that's what we're going to see again, whether it's a Trump or Biden administration, or really an anybody administration. Because you see, in Silicon Valley, Afshin, not one Silicon Valley CEO has come out to condemn Trump's trade war against China, because they agree with the trade war, because that's the only way they can compete with Chinese high-tech firms at this time. But the Bolivian example is really something to hold on to. The people held fast. Patricia Arce had, gasoline and red paint thrown on her. Her hair was cut, and she looked at the camera and says, "We are not afraid." And now she's been elected as a senator in the Senate in Bolivia. It's something to hold our heads high for.
Okay, well, we invite the U.S. ambassador, I don't know which one it might be, in the next few hours, whether it's the same one. Tokyo and Washington obviously deny what you're saying. They say it was a fraudulent constitution that Evo Morales was responsible for. You mentioned Bolivia. Che Guevara was killed in Bolivia by Jaime Terán. Reputedly, he told the killer, his own killer, you are only killing a man. With the idea that you're not killing an idea. You seem to disagree in this book, Washington Bullets. You believe Washington Bullets actually do have actions greater than Che Guevara, even so.
When I was a young person, I was so enthusiastic about the rise to power in Burkina Faso, then known as Upper Volta, of a young man by the name of Thomas Sankara in 1983. Sankara came to power, brought in very sensitive policies, very progressive people into the administration. You know, Afshin, he did something so intelligent. He said on every Wednesday, women will not do any cooking, not do any cleaning, not do any washing. We've got to teach men to take charge of the care economy inside the house. It was at that level of sensitivity that he put policies in place. In 1987, he was assassinated. He was killed. The collusion of French intelligence, the military in Burkina Faso, and so on. The entire Sankara project at that moment lost confidence. You know, people lost confidence in the ability to move history forward. The killing of Sankara, the killing of Lumumba, that had a catastrophic effect on the national liberation policy in the Congo. Can't underestimate what it does, how it shocks the psychosocial capacity of a people when their standard bearer is killed in cold blood. And, you know, we can recite name after name after name. The assassination of Chris Hani at the beginning of the South African experience after apartheid. He was killed in 1994 going out to get a newspaper. This major leader of the Communist Party, Chokri Belaid, you know, leader of the Workers' Party in Tunisia, shot to death right when Tunisia was moving out of Ben Ali's regime. These people, their death, it has an impact because it diminishes our feeling that we can move history. It scares millions of people. And I don't want to underestimate that. It's not true that just a person is killed, not an idea. Sometimes, Afshin, the idea is killed.
So you're actually saying that these CIA-linked bullets are responsible for, as you say in the book, the richest 22 men in the world having more wealth than all the women of Africa put together, the 1% owning the wealth of 6.9 billion people?
It's not responsible by itself. One Washington bullet doesn't create a billionaire, but it certainly helps. You know, for instance, if the people of the Congo were able to, in 1961, have a political agenda in front of them, with Patrice Lumumba leading their movement, if they were able to create a sovereign country with control over the economy, today you wouldn't have Glencore, a company based in Switzerland, essentially mining copper and cobalt out of that country and paying the country very little, paying the people of Congo wages that are subpar, minimal. So the billionaires are created by the killing of, you know, important people in movements. But also, let's take Colombia, where almost every day a social movement leader is assassinated. We don't know all their names, Afshin. That's the other thing. But in a small locality, or take the case of Honduras, when Berta Cáceres was killed, she was leading the fight to defend her people against, you know, a big dam project. When she was killed, they thought that it would minimize the impact, you know, on their project, the hugely lucrative project. That backfired. So it's not always the case that the killing of Lumumba, for instance, is going to have an impact which benefits the billionaires. Sometimes it backfires. It backfired in the Honduras, where Berta Cáceres' people continue to fight, and that project is now put into some disarray. So, I mean, it's not a case every time you kill somebody is going to make money. But it's often the case that when you kill somebody and you destroy the confidence of a people to fight for their basic rights, they're going to work generations for subpar wages, and other people are going to make billions. The Glencore example, that's the last man that Bill Clinton pardoned, the head of Glencore, Mark Rich. Now, well, his company domiciled in Switzerland.
And Glencore and Mark Rich say they have robust human rights practices in all their endeavors. The book traces the IMF, the World Bank, the Marshall Plan, an arguably corrupt foundation of the United Nations. We've just had Remembrance Sunday here in the last 24 hours. This book examines the whitewashing of history. Why do you think that no collective consciousness about, well, many people believe Nagasaki and Hiroshima was the reason we ended World War II? No one knows about Dresden and the RAF bombing, arguably, when they commemorate with their red poppies on their lapels World War II. Tell me about the whitewashing.
Well, first, I just want to say, Afshin, that I don't have any problem with events like Remembrance Sunday, because actual human beings went to war and they died, and we should remember them, because war is a horrible thing and nobody should be sent to it. And whether you're on the side of the angels or not, we should celebrate the death of people who died for nothing, frankly. But there is a lot of whitewashing of the system that produces war, not the people themselves who go and sacrifice. You know, for instance, in the United Kingdom, why hasn't the UK government taken an incident like Jallianwala Bagh, when in 1919, British soldiers went into a square and killed over 300 unarmed people as they did an unarmed peaceful protest? That was a massacre conducted in Amritsar in 1919. Why hasn't the British government just apologized for that? They don't apologize for it, because if they apologize for it, they have to acknowledge the system of imperialism that benefited Britain and continues to benefit Britain. There's a direct line, Afshin, between the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh and BAE Systems selling its weaponry to Saudi Arabia as it bombs Yemen. If you apologize for Jallianwala Bagh, how are you going to so easily give BAE Systems the license to continue to arm Saudi Arabia to conduct 2020 level massacres in Yemen? And I think that's the issue with amnesia. It's not really amnesia. It's actually consideration for the continuation of those old policies into the present. You don't look at Hiroshima, you don't look at Dresden, you don't look at the Soviet Red Army coming across at great casualties to take, defeat the Nazis. You don't look at all that, because you need to have a self-image of Britain as this shining star. You have to have the image of the United States as somehow exceptional, untainted by the nastiness of history. That's because you want to continue your nasty policies in the present and package it as something humanitarian, liberal, and beautiful. That's the cause of so-called amnesia. And it's something we need to, talk about and explain, that saying that I'm against this amnesia doesn't necessarily mean I want to denigrate, your ancestor who died in some war somewhere, not because they were the cause or benefited from it, but because they were basically the foot soldiers.
Well, amnesia production is in your manual of regime change, which is included in this book, I presume not prescriptively. Obviously, BAE Systems would deny what you're saying. They say they're robustly equipping the Saudi Air Force as it continues to be involved in the world's worst humanitarian crisis. They have given interviews, I should say, to business channels. And David Cameron, we invite him on the show about why he doesn't apologize for Amritsar. Vijay, Prashad, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And that's it for the show. We'll be back on Monday, 60 years to the day Democrat John F. Kennedy was voted in as President of the United States, the youngest elected U.S. president in history, and under whose presidency the Earth arguably came closest to complete annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Until then, catch all our interviews on YouTube, and don't forget to join the Underground by following us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and SoundCloud.